Later that night, he and Nikki talked in bed as they usually did after sex and before sleep. She laid a bent leg over his legs and rested a hand on his chest and looked up at him. "So are we now the proud owners of 2 firearms?" "Not yet. We have to get approved again. Another background check and 3 days to cool off." "What? They said you need to cool off?" "Not me specifically. Everyone has to. State law." "That's stupid." "Yep." Dave adjusted his position so he was lying on his side, facing Nikki. "Any news from the police?" Yeah. The bastard psycho has an alibi, so they didn't arrest him." "How could he possibly have an alibi, Davy? He did that to you. He can't have an alibi." "He obviously lied, so that's the end of that. We're basically on our own. But don't worry, I'm not going to let anything happen to you or Jake." "He just lied? That's it?" "Yeah, that's it. The cops don't care, babe. It took multiple calls just to get that much info out of them. And even then, the cop I spoke to would barely give me the time of day. They honestly don't give a shit about people." Nikki sat up and looked around for her top. She saw it on the other side of Dave. "Would you hand me that?" Dave looked where she was pointing and said, "No," smiling. "I think you should always be topless. Everywhere." He laughed, but she didn't think it was funny. Not at the moment. She crossed her arms over her chest. "I don't know why the police believe that guy's alibi, but I know it's not because they don't care. If they didn't care, they wouldn't be cops. Nikki, I talked to the cop. He was dripping with indifference." He made a jerking off motion with one hand. His lack of concern oozed right through the phone and got all over my hand. "Gross, Dave." "I'm telling you, babe, he literally couldn't have cared less. Just like the so-called social worker. She doesn't give a shit about Theodore the same way the cops don't care about us." "I don't believe that. They wouldn't have jobs to help people if they didn't care about helping people." "Then explain to me why they acted like they couldn't possibly be bothered to give a shit about any of us." Dave sat up now, ready to debate with his lovely wife. "How should I know?" she said, spreading her arms with her hands up. Dave took advantage of the move to fondle one of her breasts. "Could you stop? We just had sex." "I know, but you're so sexy. I want you again." She smiled reluctantly at the compliment, then forced a stern expression. "Stay focused. My eyes are up here. I'm serious, Dave. I'm trying to talk to you. And if you're too distracted, then give me my shirt." "I'll be good." "You better. Now listen, I don't know why it seems like they don't care, but I truly believe that people who are employed in helping professions wouldn't be if they didn't want to help people. Think about how many cases they probably have to deal with. Maybe they're overwhelmed, you know?" "You might have a point. The cop didn't even remember who I was 2 days after talking to me in person." "See? The only way he could have forgotten is if he's had to deal with so many people in the last 2 days that he can't even remember victims' names from 2 days ago." "Well, if that's the case, then he's overworked and there need to be more police. Same with Yvonne. If she's too busy to help a little boy who's being brutalized by his dad, then what's the point of her even being there?" "The police were soliciting for donations recently so they could get bulletproof vests for all of the officers. So they probably don't have the money to hire more people." "That's ridiculous," Dave said, getting off the bed and pulling on his sweatpants. "How can we give billions of dollars in foreign aid and not have enough money for adequate staffing of our own police and child services?" "That's the feds who give money away, not the states." She crawled over and grabbed the shirt she'd been wanting, then looked around for her shorts. "Then the feds need to give money to the states, to our own country, and not to other people. Jesus, isn't that just common sense?" "To us," she said, pulling on her shorts. "But we're not running for office and trying to please everyone in the world." "Oh, now who's the cynic? I'm going to get some water. You want some?" "I'll come with you," she said, laughing as she smacked Dave's hand away and pulled her top back down. "Stop it. Your sister might still be up." "Oh, like she's never seen tits before," Dave scoffed. The next morning, Dave was tuning a customer's piano when his cell phone rang. He glanced over and saw Nikki's face on his screen. He finished the string he was working on, then answered the call. "Hello, beautiful." I think he has Jake. I can't find him anywhere. I only took my eyes off him for a second to look for something in my purse. Oh my God, Dave, you have to do something. He has our little boy. Wait, slow down. Where are you? I'm at the park with Joy and I'll be right there. He looked at his tools and turned to his customer. Phyllis, I'm afraid I can't finish this just yet, but I'll be back as soon as I can. I have to attend to a family emergency, he said, racing to the door. Oh dear, I hope everything is okay, she said. He didn't hear her as he exited the house and ran to his car. Dave drove as fast as he deemed safe, ignoring speed limits. He actually thought it would be great if a cop noticed him speeding, because they could follow him to the park with lights and sirens. He thought of calling 911, but a small part of his mind insisted that Nikki was mistaken. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. Approaching the corner of the street the park was on, he took the turn in a slide. He accelerated and straightened it out, then slammed on the brakes when he saw Joy standing with Jake, shielding her eyes from the sun as she gazed around the park. He left the car parked haphazardly with the engine running as he ran toward them. Where's Nikki? He demanded, out of breath despite the short distance he'd run. I don't know, Dave. She was right here. We were looking for Jake and she said, that son of a bitch, and started toward the parking lot. At the same instant, I thought I saw Jake in the crawl tube and went over to check. When I found him and turned around to tell her, she was gone. Dave looked toward the parking lot. It was empty, but having no other clues for where to look for her, he started walking quickly in that direction. Maybe he'd be able to see where she went from there. He patted his left pant pocket to feel for cigarettes, although he'd quit smoking years before when he and Nikki started dating. She'd made it a condition if they were going to continue. He saw a person lying on the asphalt against the curb that separated the parking lot from the park grass and broke into a run. Oh, God! Her face was so bloody and her nose was angled off to the side, making her almost unrecognizable. But it was definitely Nikki. He saw movement out of the corner of his eye. He looked up and signaled for Joy to stay where she was, holding his hand up in a stop gesture. He spoke to Nikki while simultaneously dialing 911. Nikki, can you hear me? Nikki, it's me, Dave. Help is on the way. The 911 operator answered and asked what his emergency was. He told the man that his wife was injured and unconscious. He confirmed that she was breathing. She had a pulse. It looked like her nose was broken, but he wasn't sure of anything else. He told the operator where they were. Please hurry. You've got to send someone right away. The man assured him that an ambulance and police had been dispatched and would be there soon. Dave rode in the ambulance and stayed with Nikki for as long as he could until she was wheeled into an emergency surgery room, and he was gently turned away. Joy had argued that she wanted to be there too, but Dave had convinced her that it would be best for Jake if she took him home, and locked all her doors and windows. Now he wanted to talk to the police, and if they weren't willing to listen to him and take things seriously for a change, he didn't know what he would do, but he was going to do something. He was ready to kill Ron with his bare hands. He had seen 2 police officers in the lobby as paramedics wheeled Nikki into the hospital, so he went back to see if they were still there. One of them was. He was talking to a pretty girl in scrubs. Excuse me, I need to talk to you. The cop resented the interruption and was about to say something, but then he saw the look on Dave's face. Let's step outside, he replied. Dave walked toward the exit and could hear the cop telling the young woman he'd be back in a few. He went through the glass doors that slid open as he approached, then turned around and waited for the cop. Let's step over here, the officer said. I could use a smoke. Have you got another one? Dave asked. The cop handed Dave a cigarette, then lit both of them. When Dave finished coughing, he thanked the officer and asked if he knew who he was. He didn't. Dave asked if the cop was aware of the recent crimes involving Ron Mackey and the fire at his house a few days before. I'm aware of the reports regarding Mackey, and yes, I heard about the fire. Good, I won't have to tell you everything then. I just need to tell you that this bastard is the one who attacked my wife, and he needs to be arrested right now. Did you witness the attack? No, but my sister did, he lied. And where is your sister? She's at her house, in fear for her life. This psycho has already attacked me set my house on fire, and has now attacked my wife. If he goes after my son and my sister, nothing will stop me from killing him. I need to know you're going to do something right now before I have to do your job for you. I understand you're upset. I would be too. But I need you to stay focused here and give me some information, okay? What do you need to know? Dave asked, struggling to maintain his composure. What is your sister's name and address? Dave gave him the information, and the officer said he would go talk with her, and then he would see if he had enough to make an arrest. Dave knew that wasn't going to happen. The cop would find out that he had lied, and once again there would be no reason for them to arrest Ron Mackey. Dave thanked the officer and headed back into the hospital. He went to the doors to the surgery room and paced for a minute. He realized he couldn't just stay there and do nothing. As much as he wanted to be informed of Nikki's condition the instant someone could tell him anything, he knew that no one was looking out for the rest of his family. Joy and Jake could be in danger. But with a cop on the way over to talk to them, they'd be safe for a short while. He had time to do something. He looked around for restrooms and spotted a small sign high on the wall with an arrow pointing up. He walked up the hall with his eyes focused on the floor to minimize the view of his face. Inside the restroom, he walked to the far stall, took out his phone. He found his brother's phone number and repeated it to himself several times before lowering the volume to silent, no vibration. He set the phone on top of the toilet paper dispenser, then took off his shoes and placed them a foot apart on the floor in front of the toilet. Then he sat on the floor, hoping it had been cleaned recently, as he slid under the door and out of the stall. As he walked down the hall, he kept his head down, only glancing up occasionally to follow the signs to the rear exit. Once outside, he jogged across the parking lot, turning as necessary to avoid the path of cars and the roving security guard. Reaching a main boulevard, he recalled where he'd once seen a payphone, possibly one of the few remaining in the city. He headed up the street, hoping the phone would still be in place at the mom-and-pop gas station, not too far from the hospital. After jogging for a quarter of a mile, he could see the station sitting on the corner in the dark. It was out of business, but the payphone was still there. Now he just had to hope that it worked, and that the handset hadn't been yanked off or broken. He was in luck, sort of. The handset was attached and there was a dial tone. The only problem was he'd never held anything more disgusting, and the thought of putting it against his head almost made him gag. He inserted 2 quarters, dialed his brother's number, and held the phone an inch from his left ear, praying that his brother would pick up, despite seeing an unknown number appear on his cell phone. It rang 4 times, and Dave was sure his plan was going to die before it got started. "Hello?" he heard his brother ask suspiciously. "Danny, it's me, Dave. I need you to meet me at the closed-down gas station north of the General Hospital. It's urgent, and I need you to bring the thing you showed me in your backyard last year." "Fuck. On my way. 5 minutes." The line went dead, and Dave smiled. He and his brother disagreed on a lot of things, but no matter what, they were always there for each other when it really mattered. He was glad that Danny didn't even ask a single question. He was simply on his way, just like that. 4 minutes later, Dave saw his brother's SUV pull into the dark gas station, and after a brief hesitation, came gliding up to him by the front doors. Dave ran around to the passenger side, hopped in, and said, "That was fast. Head north and don't get pulled over. I have very little time." On the way there, he explained what his plan was, and how he knew it was weak, but he hoped it might convince Ron that he was messing with the wrong family. Danny agreed that the plan was weak, but was willing to go along with it, especially after hearing everything that had happened to his brother's family. He was even willing to do more than he was being asked, but Dave wouldn't allow him to take such a risk, even though Danny's offer would solve the Ron problem permanently. A block before they reached Ron's house, Danny stopped the vehicle so he and Dave could trade places. Dave had objected to this change in his plan, but his brother insisted on being the one to actually commit the crime. He'd been in jail before, and he could survive it again. He also didn't have a wife and child waiting for him, and depending on him to remain free and come home. Dave's heart was beating like crazy as they slowly approached the house. His hands were sweating and slippery on the steering wheel. He almost couldn't believe they were doing this. It was so out of character for him. Since Danny was willing to do the worst part of the job, maybe he should call this off and let him do it alone later. Why risk both of them going to jail? No, he couldn't do that. This was his problem. It was enough that Danny was helping. He wasn't going to push the whole thing off on his brother. He refocused his attention on the house as they were slowly passing on the dark street. He saw the big white truck in the driveway and said, "There!" Danny didn't hear the next thing he said, which was, "Wait, not that one!" The sound of the shots drowned out his voice as Danny fired at the upper part of the large front window. Even with the gun held outside the SUV, Dave thought he was going to be deaf for the rest of his life. When Danny stopped firing at the wrong house, Dave yelled, "Fuck! Fuck! Fuck!" "There's no going back now, brother," Danny said. "That was the wrong fucking house. It was supposed to be this one," Dave said, pointing at yet another house with a white truck in the driveway. "No problem," Danny replied, and fired off another 4 rounds.